Okay, let's talk about one of the most fascinating and, let's be honest, controversial ideas in Christian theology, the rapture. You know, the sudden, mysterious disappearance of millions of people from the face of the earth. So what is this all about, really? Where did this idea even come from? Well, we're going to unpack it. And just to kick things off, check out this quote from our source material. The rapture is called, and I'm quoting here, the most preposterous belief in biblical Christianity. Wow. So the idea that people will just vanish in an instant, it sounds completely wild, right? So how could anyone possibly take it seriously? That's the exact question we're going to dive into. So how do you even begin to defend an idea that you yourself call preposterous? Well, the source makes this really fascinating comparison to quantum physics. I mean, think about it. A lot of the concepts in quantum physics sound totally bizarre, almost silly, but physicists will tell you it's fundamentally, unquestionably correct. The argument here is kind of similar. The rapture might sound strange on its own, but it's presented as a vital piece of a much larger, totally coherent theological system. To get to the bottom of the why behind this whole thing, the source material argues that we need to rewind the clock way back. We're going to look at the customs of an ancient Jewish wedding, because it turns out this old tradition is seen as a powerful pattern, almost like a blueprint for the rapture itself. Okay, so this ancient model has 4 main stages. It all starts with the betrothal. This was a super serious, binding marriage contract where a price was paid. And from that moment on, the bride was considered set apart exclusively for her groom. Next, the groom departs. He goes back to his father's house to build a new home for them. This kicks off a period where the bride waits. And here's the key. She has no idea when he's coming back. Could be any day, any hour. So she has to be ready at all times. And all of this builds up to the final dramatic step, the surprise return. The groom comes back when no one expects it, often at midnight with a shout, to finally claim his bride. And here is where it all clicks into place, connecting that ancient wedding directly to Christian theology. The purchase price, that's seen as the sacrifice of Christ. The church, that becomes the bride, set apart just for him. Christ's ascension into heaven is a perfect parallel to the groom departing for his Father's house, and it all leads to that incredible promise from the Gospel of John, "I will come again and receive you unto myself." The entire wedding ceremony is basically presented as a living prophecy playing out. So we've kind of covered the theological foundation, the why. But what about the how? I mean, what are the actual mechanics of this sudden disappearance? For that, we've got to look at a very specific Bible passage, and more importantly, a very specific Greek word that is the absolute key to the whole thing. And that word is harpazo. It's a Greek verb, and it doesn't just mean to lift up gently. No, this is way more intense. It means to snatch away, to seize something suddenly, forcefully. Think of it like a rescue, a rapid, decisive action. This one word is the linchpin for how the whole event is described physically. And this passage from 1 Thessalonians, this is the place where the rapture is described in detail. It says believers who are still alive will be caught up. And that phrase right there, caught up, is the English translation of harpazo, to meet the Lord in the air. This single action, this harpazo, is what the entire doctrine is built on. Now, you've probably heard someone say, hey, the word rapture isn't even in the Bible. And, in our English Bibles, that's technically true. The term actually comes from the word rapiemur. That was the Latin translation of harpazo that was used in the historic Vulgate Bible. So our English word rapture comes directly from that Latin root. Pretty interesting, right? All right, so we have the basis for the idea, and we have the mechanics of how it supposedly happens. But that leads us to another really important question. What's the theological point of all this? Why is this sudden dramatic change even necessary in the first place? At its core, it's about solving a huge theological problem laid out right here in 1 Corinthians. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. See, our physical earthly bodies are described as being mortal, corruptible. The source explains that they're just fundamentally not built for an eternal, incorruptible reality. Something has to change, and it has to be a radical change. And the solution, right in that same chapter, is presented as this incredible mystery that's finally being revealed. An instantaneous change. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, believers will be given new, incorruptible resurrection bodies, bodies that are fit for eternity. The rapture, then, is essentially the mechanism for this transformation for everyone who's alive when it happens. Okay, now we're at a point that causes a ton of confusion. A lot of people hear about Christ returning and just assume it's all one big event. But the source material we're looking at draws a very clear, very important line between two separate future events, the rapture and what's called the second coming. And this is where that distinction really matters. Let's break it down. In the rapture, Christ comes for his people, meeting them up in the air. And it could happen at any moment without warning. The second coming, on the other hand, is when Christ returns with his people, physically touching down on the earth to set up his kingdom. The rapture is framed as a secret, imminent rescue mission. The second coming is a public, global event that follows a very specific 7-year timeline of science. Two totally different events with two totally different purposes. So we've gone from a supposedly preposterous idea all the way to an intricate model based on ancient promises. We've seen the rapture presented not as some random, bizarre event, but as the ultimate fulfillment of a covenant, the surprise return of the groom for his bride. And that brings us to the final thought from our source material, which shifts from just explaining doctrine to something much more personal. If the promise is real, if a place has truly been prepared for you, the only question left for the believer is a simple but profound one. Are you ready for the return?